Xirtus.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Join us on another exciting adventure of Xirtus.
Well, hello there. What is up, my Tartaria dudes? You're watching Xirtus. Welcome to Recent Tartarians, a show on the Xirtus channel where we go over and over again through the historical records and try to figure out what incarnation is really going on. A lot of things have been happening recently to me, and again, life seems to be changing. Recent Tartarians has recently had a number of high-profile interactions from everyone from Walter Bosley to Graham Hancock, and it seems as though, while they're all still wrestling with what exactly Tartaria is, and also what it's not, such as the Tartarian tablets of Grotesnica, and the bastion forts that are not bastion forts, yet everywhere you look, there they are. Defying the historic records, actually these bastion forts are all over the place, many of them much older than previously acknowledged from cultures supposedly isolated from each other. In order to differentiate from the traditional 15th century bastion forts, these have been referred to by the Tartarian researchers as star forts, because they look like stars or snowflakes. And by now, if you were paying attention, everybody seems to know this within the recent Tartarian community, something I think we're all pretty proud of. I know I am. In fact, for so many reasons, I'm confused how well this is actually going. Despite everything pushing against it, somehow we've been able to put together this relatively open educational community, and people are spreading the word. And even if my channel is a bit suppressed, and yes, that's certainly a downplay, the certainty of meme magic is extremely potent. And there are so many people that are learning about Tartary and are making their own memes about it to make it easier for you to find out yourself. But in general, there's nothing you need to buy, and there's nothing that you need to do. You don't need to work so hard. You don't need to spend years in training to become some sort of a Tartarian Jedi, unless you want to. We've made it as easy as just watching a couple of Xirtus Tartary videos. As far as I can tell, that's the fastest way to learn about what we found out about Tartaria. Though actually, there might even be one faster way, and that's directly from interacting with those that are studying Tartaria itself. I mean, it's not that hard to reach out to some people that are doing more than taking pictures from the 1800s and saying, without telephone wires, there's free electricity in the past. Just drop by the Tartary Discord. We have tons of evidence of actual electrical and mechanical innovations and inventions with blueprints and schematics going back for millennia. We even have some crazy weaponized autists building some of this technology themselves. Come on down and check it out and get involved. If for no other reason than so that you can test any of these experiments yourself. But one thing should be made clear: the Tartary Xirtus Discord, as a community, exists in order to check and verify and to disprove any misconceptions that we're constantly coming across, either from extrapolated legends or just because we're reading history, which was flat out already a lie to begin with. But the bottom line is just get the basics covered so you can understand what we're talking about. There are some things which, as extreme as the hashtags that describe them might be, actually are pretty practical. It's a pretty simple, quick progression from hearing about mud floods to learning about Tartaria to discovering the 4,000 plus star forts that we've seen so far and counting, to watching hours of Xirtus history and other YouTube channels about Tartaria, and then just becoming one with the Xirtus Tartary Discord. It's a simple mimetic equation: man, woman, birth, death, infinity at Xirtus. Well, that's my pitch. Tartaria, my dudes. There was once a great mud flood. Once upon a time, there was Tartaria. And maybe a year ago, if I had seen this video, even I might have said, okay, that's quite something to assert. But that would have been a year ago, and we've done a lot of research since then. So much so that a lot of it's being cited by the very skeptics of Tartaria itself in order to disprove and criticize some of the more flamboyant of Tartarian theories. And this is actually completely fine and what we want, because the idea is to prove the truth about Tartaria, not only to bring attention to the idea and its fantasy, Now, there are obviously other things we're interested in talking about as well, such as causality, multidimensionality, singularity, the noosphere, the milieu, general metaphysics, the Mandela effect, and it's hard not to sometimes wonder if any of those things have anything to do with this historical narrative. I myself have a pretty weird story which I've told before about Dobie Gillis, a live-action series about the youth considered groundbreaking at the time. A show with 4 or 5 seasons, comic books, eventually even a made-for-TV movie. A famous show with famous actors that went on to other famous works as well. The only weird thing about this show to me being is that I somehow have missed this show. In all of my years watching television and movies and downloading every piece of data I could find and working at CNN with 6 screens in front of me and access to all of their digital records that I could access every single film reel that they had in storage. I grew up with 16mm projectors that I would run myself, for crying out loud. And I don't want to say that I'm the greatest cinephile in history, but it just seems completely weird, even today, that it's possible that I could have missed this show, which was so casually apparently aired in marathons on TV Land and Nick at Night. And all of a sudden, in 2016, around the election, when all sorts of things seemed slightly augmented from the way people remember them, I found myself where not only did Dobie Gillis exist, it fundamentally impacted the lives of so many of the baby boomers that I had met, and in some way or another made all of the ones familiar with the show recognizably better than they were in my memories of them before this, as if somehow they had learned positive lessons from this show. Now, I know that might seem strange, but hear me out. Very early on in the Xirtus channel, I made a video about Dobie Gillis and Flight 370, and I recommend watching that one. But in the years since that video was made, I've been keeping my eye on the Dobie Gillis data and watching it as it's spread and grown even more. For instance, just recently the made-for-TV movie, the actors, when interviewed, could remember being a part of, but could not for the life of them remember what exactly the film was about. None of them. A film called Bring Me the Head of Dobie Gillis. I don't want to go too deep into how that movie goes, for a number of reasons. Let's just say it took me a number of days to complete watching, because I was interrupted a series of times by glitch-in-the-matrix-like issues, which reflected perfectly the problems which faced Dobie Gillis in the film, simultaneous and synchronic to the moments in my life and in the movie itself, even corresponding to a moment when the power goes out, where during a snowstorm, the power went out while I was watching the film. The next time I was able to turn the film on, the scene immediately following, when the film shut down, has the professor of the school stand up in front of the auditorium and explain to the audience that due to an emergency power outage, the remainder of the school play in the film would not be seen by the audience until the next day. This, like about 6 other strange occurrences within the film, could be dismissed, but because of my previous concerns about Dobie Gillis, I cannot help but be drawn to wonder. Also, something that has materialized in the last year, the Dobie Gillis comic books, a series which focuses on Dobie Gillis in the first season before his hair darkens. Now, around this time, I began speaking through my friend Ian Crossland to the game theorist John Paul Larson. John Paul Larson has done a lot of interesting work regarding this concept of the multiverse, the idea of simultaneous converging conscious entities that connect egos across a non-convergent timeline or spaceline of multiple times. That is to say, there are other U's perhaps, mathematically speaking, some of them better, some of them richer, some of them poorer, some of them already dead. It somehow would seem to me that within this world there are a number of different converging timelines, different actions which lead to the same consequence, and as crazy as that might seem, mathematically there is a law of equivalence that would explain this. There is therefore another universe where there is no Dobie Gillis, and another universe where Dobie Gillis existed for less than a season and was all but forgotten. And yet another where Dobie Gillis essentially becomes the fundamental pathology behind. And there is yet another where Dobie Gillis and Maynard G. Krebs embody the Bill and Ted of the 1950s, and an entire utopian society is built upon the civilization which flourishes out of that ideology. Mathematically speaking, there really are a lot of dimensions. This is something that's been pretty commonly referred to recently by a number of shows, including recent Tartarians, Rick and Morty, or even the X-Files. I'm sure there's more, but I haven't had time to watch all the new shows. Though, let me know, Tartary dude, I want to know more. Even really had time to talk about The Last Jedi, a movie that, while it may not have the depth as the original Star Wars, might still make you cry, as it explains the esoterics of the Carbon Age. But I think I should give you just a little bit longer before I do the Star Wars spoilers. So let's talk a bit about the things I've been doing while I've been living in New England, shall we? I'm in New England's Connecticut, a place that's pretty famous for spiritual mediums. The movie Ghostbusters is actually based on Dan Aykroyd's familial occupation because, for whatever reason, ghosts and spiritual mediums have been frequently participant in New England stories for centuries. The Palace Theater in Norwalk, Connecticut, where I've been working for the last few months and studying Tartarian architecture and history, casually considered to be haunted by Harry Houdini, a man who did not believe in ghosts or spiritual mediums. In fact, worked hard to disprove them all as charlatans, in this building no less. But I like to think that if this building is haunted, it's probably haunted by some more interesting characters. Houdini's probably here for sure, don't get me wrong. Nikola Tesla was here, and that's probably worth trying to divine. But you know who else graced the Palace Theater? Jimmy Durant. And I gotta say, if I got a little Durant in me, I wouldn't feel too bad about it. Not one bit. And admittedly, I've been working on a lot of other things than just Tartaria, such as movie scripts, such as research into electromagnetics and ionic propulsion, anti-gravity, and into making some movies maybe. We found pretty conclusive evidence that there was more in New England than teepees before New England. In fact, it seems as though New England was old Tartaria. And not just New England, into Newfoundland and Greenland as well. Beyond New England and Maine, through St. Pierre, everywhere across Newfoundland and Labrador, unlocks the key. If you're looking for stories of collapsed cities and fresh off the boat foundlings, there are answers to be found in New Brunswick. And south of Newfoundland, from Canada to New York, along the beaches of Montauk, New Haven, Rhode Island, Cape Cod, Boston, Portland, Acadia National Park, and inland even into the Starfort Lakes of Vermont. Because there are lakes with star forts on them, bastion forts, whatever you want to call them. But in lakes in Vermont, it starts to become a bit more obvious what this seafaring nation was like and how it connected everywhere from Newfoundland and Labrador to Havana, Bermuda, and Haiti. And in fact, some of those islands are still controlled predominantly by no one else and inhabited by virtually no one else but this small controlling elite, which has seized these lands. But just as a side note, I wanted to go over this picture again because I thought it was pretty interesting. I took the one on the right, and I actually took the one on the left too. I'm a time traveler, just kidding. But did you notice how similar these pictures really are? I mean, look at the cars themselves. Granted, not everything's the same. The lack of the two pillars in today's picture, for instance. But look at some of the things that are the same. For instance, the car in front of the theater. How often do you even see a car today with round lights? Not trying to say anything too crazy with that, just saying, sure is trippy. Also, a piece of perspective, as a Californian, one reason I decided that it was worth having a winter in New England. Just once ever, for the bucket list. Let me explain the differences of weather patterns as someone from California. You see, we don't have seasons. Not the way people in New England do. And maybe where you're from, there are seasons. Seasons to me are very interesting. Seasons make you prepare for something. You have to live in the season you are, because the season that is coming will change the way you have to live. It's not like that in California. In New England and in places with winter, the grasshopper must prepare or else he will die unless the ants take care of him. This is really good, probably, for people, as far as I can tell. Because summers are short, you enjoy them while you can. Because the winter is coming, you harvest the fall for all it offers. Because the spring will come again, you endure the winter. These seasons are healthy cycles, which actually help civilization and artists dream. When the colors are drained for months on end, these beautiful places become perfect for contemplation and channeling inward. Where I come from, it's not like that at all. We don't have seasons, we have acts of God. You never know when God might strike. Many Indonesian religions recommend making God laugh. This often helps, but eventually, God's gonna come for you. Sometimes literally just shaking your house to pieces or burning down the entire forest. God promised not to drown everyone all at once ever again, no matter how bad humans get. This is why we use the rainbow as the symbol of the covenant. But as a Californian, it is important to remember that God never promised not to light us all on fire. And so it's best to remember that at any moment it could all end. So to take care to enjoy every breath that you have. And while California is very beautiful, there's just something special, just something about the fleeting beauty, like passing youth, of the seasons of New England. And those gorgeous hues of red rotting chlorophyll, like lipstick on a kiss, when the green is gone and there's nothing left but snow. I mean, it's a somber place, man. It's melancholy. It can be kind of moody. I'm not even kidding. And so it makes sense that there's such a neo-romantic, or I guess even just that there was a romantic historical period, and why people were just so generally Salem and very goth. And still are, man. I mean, there are a lot of goths here. It's crazy. I mean, it's awesome, but it's, of all people, Harry Houdini, who was very upset at the idea of being able to speak to the dead after losing someone that he loved himself, and found it super douchey for people to pretend to talk to the dead in front of people that were alive in order to manipulate them out of money or into feeling better instead of searching for some sort of actual truth, namely inside themselves. That was his whole spiel. Ironic if he really is a ghost here, because what would he think? That would be like the most embarrassing thing, to be so anti-ghost and then become ghost. I don't even know, but I can't see that as much more than extreme irony. However, Houdini used very decent scientific techniques in order to prove the variance in detail, interpret data from members of the audience. And in terms of the capacity to produce actual, verifiable, clear answers, were unable to do so. But the Fox sisters, and I think at some point we mentioned the Fox sisters, and this is important because, again, with Dan Aykroyd and his family that were Ghostbusters in the 1800s, and even into the 20th century, a lot of it revolved around the Fox sisters, a group of 3 sisters who, since they were very little girls, said that they were in touch with the dead and acted as spiritual mediums. And while eventually they denied it, and they begged people to stop acknowledging them and went into hiding, more or less it always seems like there's something slightly more to the Fox sisters. The Fox sisters began to downplay their participation in clairvoyancy rituals, often performing them in secret and claiming to have disbanded. Leia lost her first husband and married a successful Wall Street banker. Margareta met Elisha Kane, the Arctic explorer. Like Houdini, Kane was a skeptic of ghosts and clairvoyance. This was a time when science seemed super awesome, and simple magic, witchcraft, seemed like basic boomer stuff. A lot of these new Tavistock-esque psychosomatic atheists believe that all of it, angels and demons and aliens, etc., only existed inside of themselves. And in a sense, that they were God, or that God did not exist and was now dead because they had killed God with their ego. And that, essentially, they could never be invaded by aliens or possessed by demons because they were above it. A super comforting and safe field to have, even if the argument has the lack of sophist legitimacy, and for it to be proven wrong would not only be dangerous, it would actually mean the end of your soul and being and all those you know and love. Something that would be kind of an epic bummer to the power of damnation. And this has always been my main concern with anyone saying that aliens don't exist, because, like saying demons are in your mind and are just whatever you want them to be, quote unquote. It's just so seemingly vulnerable to anything that you do not anticipate or understand. So while it's true, most everything supernatural or even astronomical seems to be faked, the obsession to know what's out there and if there is an out there still seems relatively important in the crusade to protect one's family's spirit and soul. And you could say aliens are fake and that elves are fake and that spirit's fake and that the soul is fake. And while I'll admit that most of these guys in the room could not prove to Houdini, in fact none of them could, that they were able to speak to the dead or that they had any control over the soul. If the greatest trick the devil ever performed was to convince man that the devil didn't exist, then those things that would follow would be God, angels, aliens, and human soul itself. Another person besides Harry Houdini who hung out at the Palace Theater in Norwalk, Connecticut, or at least at a few shows here, was Nikola Tesla, a man who loved a pigeon and said, "We're only antenna for the radio." Before Timothy Leary was telling people to drop out, Nikola Tesla was telling people to tune in, particularly using the peptides in their nanostructures. At the time, he was referring particularly to the neurotransmitters of the metatonins, which from here on out, metatonin will signify a number of different sorts of transmitters beyond neuro, including metabolism and nervous system. All of these include peptides, monoamines, amino acids, and other sorts of neurotransmitters: serotonin, dopamine, melatonin, cortisol, etc. Cortisol being a peptide hormone. But these structures of chemicals can be turned on and off with carbon and radio, and harvesting these energies makes it plausible for the technologies that's coming out right now. Things like wireless energy harvesting, graphene OLED multi-touch screen displays, synthetic oxygenated blood cells made out of other materials than iron, blood cells that can hold oxygen for 1,000 hours. Your heart could stop, you could call the doctor when you woke up, schedule an appointment, come in on Thursday, have your blood changed. Adenal retrovirals, not just vaccines, but actually the capacity to change your DNA with older sequences of your DNA or someone else's in order to be young again. And of course, the Neuralink, the capacity to have Windows 95 installed right on your brain. God help us all. And this is a multi-trillion-dollar future. I'm sure that some of the original installations of the Neuralink will be free, but eventually you'll have to pay, or else every 20 minutes your mind will simply freeze up and you'll start screaming that your neuro demo is over until you pay to think again. And you can see this technology already starting to integrate itself, not just in your mind, but in your clothing, your computers, in your municipal systems and transportation machines, and also into free energy. Ever since we started talking about planes and that we mentioned that there would be new energy systems that were coming out, there have been at least 3 or 4 major significant disclosures that I have seen to corroborate the series I've just created on flight. NASA, for instance, admitting the functioning of their impossible engine and the lack of necessity for fuel in order to use rockets in the future, and the lack of necessity for using fuel. Now, the methanol battery, a game-changing alcohol-fueled battery which allows a 15-kilogram drone to fly for 12 hours. These are just the beginnings of the things that you should expect to see happen over 2020, the biggest transitional year in technology in a century. Technologies that you can actually see predicted by Ingersoll Lockwood in Baron Trump's Underground Journey. However, something I want to go over because it's Christmas, solstice, Yule, New Year's, it's all coming down. The movie It's a Wonderful Life, which apparently not everyone has seen. Strange to me because isn't that what you're supposed to watch every year? Well, I sure do. Can't seem to help myself. So here's a quick rundown. It's a Wonderful Life is the story of a man at Christmas time who meets an angel in training. The man hates his life and wishes he was never born, and he experiences, because of that angel in training, the miraculous event of being able to witness what the world would be like without him. And due to the chaos theory, the ripple in time of him never being born causes a butterfly effect, which completely leaves the world worse for wear. a complete surprise to him. It's a timeless and fascinating movie that tells the tale of destiny, that argues the individual's inner conflict between destiny and choice, and resolves that more valuable than that choice itself is the investment of that choice into duty and honor. And it stars Jimmy Stewart. It's a rad movie. A lot of the time when you watch an old movie, if you haven't seen it before and you don't have the investment, especially for kids these days, it seems they can't even watch things that were shot on film because they move too slowly, let alone black and white. So you kind of have to imagine it. So you kind of have to use the Ignatian method a little bit to modernize instead of the film itself, your own perspective of it. It's a Wonderful Life is basically the first Matrix. It's a hardcore dystopian reality. This hardcore dystopian reality depicting America at a time in general entirely relatable about a dude in a paradigm who's up against a wall and the glitches in the system, the Deus Ex Machina, the righteousness right out of this guy, and also the Jesuit staging from the metaphysical significance of human action and the destiny of choice and enjoying the fruits of one's labors make It's a Wonderful Life as much of a sci-fi film as Die Hard, a Christmas movie. The best, in fact. The one that all others seem to get their ideas from. And it would seem that without this man's life, so many other lives would not have been. And I guess I can give you a spoiler for this one instead of Star Wars. He saves his brother's life, he saves a man's life. Here and there in his life, he ends up saving people's lives. You might be surprised how many times you might have saved someone's life just by watching this movie. It will remind you when you might have been there for each other, even when you've done this for the least of each other. Sound familiar? Everybody seems to like this movie. Historically, it's famous. But another thing is that the reason this movie is famous is because it went into public domain, and so no one had to pay for the rights to show it for decades. For years, this was taught to me as a lesson of Frank Capra being a fool, the director. But when you think about how many people have seen this movie because of its obligatory showing every year for 70 years. In fact, in a lot of ways, I now, because of this, think of Frank Capra as the ultimate film genius. He made a number of other movies, but this one, everyone has seen. It is a gift to the world, and also a message in a bottle, which leads you back to Frank Capra. Born May 18th, 1897, died September 3rd, 1991. Famous for several important movies. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, a film about the corruption in Washington, which during the air raids in France was shown every day over and over again for 3 months during the Nazi occupation in World War II. Also The Wonders of Science, an episode of which can be seen on the Xirtus channel, Hemo the Magnificent. There are a few others, but of course, what sticks out, It's a Wonderful Life. Now, there's a few other interesting things about Frank Capra that should not go unacknowledged. For instance, his association with Hollywood as a Catholic would normally be considered rather suspect, particularly at this time. Frank Capra was a member of the Knights of Columbus and the Order of the Pug, a paramasonic society, though restructured, originally founded in 1740 by Clemens Augusta of Bavaria, a Roman Catholic who intended to bypass the papal bull in Eminenti Apostolatus of 1738. The Order of the Pug, you say? What a strange symbol for secret society. You see, the pug is a very small dog. It is not exactly the most handsome dog, and certainly not the strongest nor the brightest of all dogs, yet somehow a favorite amongst royals. Pugs seem to come up a lot in Hollywood amongst Catholics and those Jesuit trained. There have even been a number of celebrities with pugs recently, if you haven't already heard about them. And if you haven't, I recommend actually looking into that just a little bit deeper if I didn't make that clear. You see, something else if you didn't figure it out is that all of these men are dead. Now, I'm not saying that the pug killed them, certainly not this sweet little puppy here, but it's at least worth knowing about this historical order. Pugs were brought from China to Europe in the 16th century. Records of Tartarian pugs can be found. Pugs were popularized in Western Europe by the House of Orange of the Netherlands and the House of Stuart in the United Kingdom. In the 19th century, Queen Victoria developed a passion for pugs, which she passed on to other members of the royal family. William Hogarth, the English painter, printmaker, and pictorial satirist, was a famous cartoonist who had a pug named Trump. Louis Francois Roubiliac sculpted Trump in terracotta in 1741. Rather interesting that the ceramic and porcelain pug statues are based on a dog named Trump. At the time in Britain, Scottish Terriers were considered the official companion of royals, but it was not until Queen Victoria introduced the pug from her trips to China. In ancient times, Tartarian pugs were bred to be companions for the ruling families of Tartaria. Pugs were highly valued by the Tartarians. Eventually, the royal dogs were kept in luxury by the Song Dynasty Chinese emperors. Pugs are even kept in Buddhist monasteries in Tibet as pets. Ask for how Robin Williams was found naked dead on the floor after being hanged with a silk handkerchief off of a doorknob? Or what the real story is with Chester Bennington and John Podesta? You know, that guy who looks just like him, but creepier? Or what exactly Chris Cornell could have done to upset the powers that be, considering his first act of infamy was a song about the black sun. I mean, it's really hard to please these people, let alone keep them satisfied. Anyway, the Order of the Pug, now you know. Take a moment sometime, take the time to look into the boys club, but it's Christmas, so let's focus on something a bit more jolly, shall we? So, It's a Wonderful Life. Decidedly. A movie with the moral lesson that the struggle is real, but also that suffering is an illusion that you can overcome. And it seems like everybody should be watching this kind of despair right as their miracle is happening to them. Because so many take for granted that everything is working out, like as if somehow, because we're in some sort of a cosmic alignment, we're just owed this synchronistic age of Aquarius, giving us extra leg space in our first-class ticket ride to the tropical resort of wherever. And the deal is life is just not supposed to be that sweet because that much sweet is disgusting and it will give you diabetes. Stop having that much sweetness. Learn like Lao Tzu to just dig that bitter a little bit more. But don't get so obsessed with bitter that you become bitter, because that's also annoying. And compassion and sympathy seem to be the side effects of having empathy instead of narcissism. You see, everybody's in the cold when it's wintertime. Another interesting thing about seasons, sometimes we all face things. Sometimes facing suffering does not make you special. Sometimes what makes you special makes you weird, makes you a freak, and makes you lonely. What you might need, others might not. It might be impossible for them to take off their shoes and unplug from the matrix. And yet they need you to take that jolly red pill, because it's not your life. It's not your life. That's not your breath you're breathing. That air, I'm serious, that air does not belong to you. And with enough faith, you can not only move mountains, you could tie a lasso around the moon and bring it down. I'm serious. Test all things. Like love, Christmas magic is very real. I've seen Christmas do amazing things for people's lives. I wouldn't say it was Santa Claus, unless you really needed to personify the spirit of Christmas. But I would say the spirit of Christmas is giving, and it's in all of you. And also, that life is wonderful, and that you should appreciate it. And every time there's a low, remember that there was a high and there will be another. And when you see someone else having a low, be there for each other. Don't waste your opportunity to be a part of each other's lives. Call your mother. Tell her you love her. Call your bro. Make time to be grateful and to express care for each other. And this isn't really supposed to tell you everything you need to know about It's a Wonderful Life, so go see that movie too. I mean, come on. It's Christmas. Get it done. Now, I ought to mention that I'm about to go to the Bermuda Triangle. Apparently it's super cheap to go right now because this is the worst season, hurricane season, but hurricanes are happening in Tampa Bay. It's going to be totally fine. Don't worry, I'm going to the Bermuda Triangle. It's going to be awesome. Just the tip. Not like right into the center in a rowboat. Relax. And while I'm in Tartaria, I mean, you know, Bermuda, I will be checking out some of the interesting things, everything from the architecture to the volcanoes, and particularly any history that we can find on another civilization inhabiting Bermuda before the British Empire. Tartarian, my dude. And we'll be looking into a number of disappearances and reappearances of missing boats and planes that have been found in the Bermuda Triangle. There's even some underwater pyramids that Google Images has picked up. Yeah, Bermuda's pretty cool. And apparently there's like a whole thing about wearing shorts in Bermuda, so that'll be easy. But if there's anything you want particularly me to look at while I'm in Bermuda, and if there's anything that you want me to check out about Bermuda before I get there, make sure you send a link to us in the Tartary Discord. We have a whole section right now on ancient Britain, looking suspiciously Tartarian with those wall builders, and a number of these colonial British islands seem to show bastion forts, and Bermuda's no exception. And who knows, maybe we'll find that whole Bermuda Atlantis a whole other Atlantis than the other Atlantises that we've already found. What can I say? Tartaria, dude. Hecka awesome. Oh yeah, and I know it's Christmas and you probably already dealt with most of your Christmas shopping, but we do have some new Tartaria t-shirts. If you're at all interested in becoming a Tartaria dude, go to TeePublic, the link's available at the description, and pick up one of the Tartaria dude t-shirts, or maybe a cool Tartarian mug. We even have this super epic Tartaria girl t-shirt, which you can also get as a fleece or a purse. Frankly, I'm pretty into this one. It's super fly. Help me, Tartaria girl. I need you. It's a sweet way to support Tartaria. It won't break your bank, and it might turn some heads. And that way we can keep bringing information to you, because despite what you may have heard, we do not work for the Illuminati. They don't pay us. One of the nice perks about not promising to keep a secret is we can still talk, and therefore, we do, so support the research, because the Illuminati's check bounced. I kid the Illuminati, I kid them.
Where is this airing right now? Is this?
Recent
This
talk
program is coming to
Terrians.
you via Relay 2 satellite, a spacecraft orbiting the Earth at a speed of over 17,000 miles per hour.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent talk Terrians.
Xirtus.